I'm going to text the last.
Good evening, everyone.
Hi there. I'm going to text the last two quick right now so we can get going.
Roland and Ruth, did you get the materials that we sent out for the community center? Okay.
When were they sent?
I think it might have been earlier this week. It might have been late last week. Might have been Friday.
Oh yeah, I found it.
Hey, Dave, what is that background you got there?
House.
Good answer.
A lot of effort, man.
Oh, it's your house.
Yeah, that's my house.
Oh, gotcha. I thought you said a house. I was like, okay.
No. Oh, no. I had to do it last. Yeah, I did it last Saturday too, as the storm was coming in, because I knew everything was going to freeze up. So if I wanted on the roof, I had to do it that day.
Oh man, wow! I got to drive by. That's awesome.
Earlier, it looked like it was going to be good weather last weekend, and then Thursday night they started talking the storm. I'm like, what? So I had to hurry up and get everything done, and three outfits later, I finished off.
Wow, nice.
Yeah. Regular.
Well, they were sent Tuesday. They were sent Tuesday at 12:05.
Yeah, I got it. Thank you.
Okay. Yeah, I'll come off video. I have Rod and Andrew here in the event that you have any questions with this meeting that they might be able to respond to you.
I'm really hoping the other two show, because that's kind of the whole. I've texted them and I haven't heard back. It's kind of the whole point, to get the group on the same page. Oh, there's Matt. There we go. So we're up to 4. We have a couple more seconds. Especially where this thing's always been such a tentative subject with agreement. Oh, maybe it was just tucked under my collar, my microphone. Hidden cameraman.
Nope, there we go. It's all good now. I couldn't hear you for a second. There was something wrong with my volume.
All right. Well, I don't know if we'll hear from Marie or anything, so let's move on. Got an email a week or more ago from Pam, who is one of the contacts, I guess, for the community center committee, and they wanted to come back and start meeting this January. But prior to doing that, they wanted to have a sit down with the Board of Selectmen and clear the air. If you recall, our very last meeting before the pandemic hit, we got an update from this committee. And I'll get into it later, but the report, I think, was a little bit of a surprise to many of us. So prior to us sitting down with them in January, I thought it'd be a good idea for us to get together, as this board, as it's comprised now, has never had a conversation about the community center. Matt has now replaced Bill, so we have a different makeup. I don't have any idea what Matt's thought is, but I thought it was good for us to come back together. Additionally, Derek hadn't been involved with that committee at all. And as our liaison between us and staff, and then staff goes to committees and such, it's important, I think, we bring him in line. So I was going to I'll just give everyone a little refresher from, I made some notes, kind of remind us, and this, Matt, will be for you probably the first time, where we were when we decided to start this process. And I want to say we started July of 2019, maybe, first conversations about it, and then we appointed a committee and such. So is that good for everybody? Just a refresher, and then we can go. Okay. So as I have it, the original decision was two of us strongly in favor of researching a community center, Roland and myself. Though three were not in favor, but they decided to allow at least exploration. That was Bill, Marie, and Ruth. And it was a lot of, if I recall, a lot of hemming and hawing. It certainly wasn't, it was begrudgingly they went along with it, if I recall. And it still may be that way. If the strongest opposition and some of the things that came out of our meeting as a board when Rich was with us to move forward with this, cost was a strong opposition. There was a great concern of that. There was no support among the group for adding on additional items, library, schools, other communities. It was a topsome project, and it's all about driving the cost and keeping it. And the main staple of this that came from the group was it must be a public and private partnership. There needs to be sponsorships. There needs to be whether it's ongoing support, one-time support, or anything, it needed to be public and private. Also required was to know full cost, because it's not, we can build this and we'll try to figure out how to staff it later. This is something you must have staff right off the bat. And this building comes into play, it will require additional staff. There's no doubt in my mind, and there's no sense in walking away from that right now and trying to just pull the wool over people's eyes and saying, we think we can do it for this cost. So that's where we as the group, if what I recall, the conversations, part of the reason for this was our recreation needs. It's our needs for meeting space, community, whether it be the town itself, election, somewhere to hold an election, have a steady place for that. The possibility of having rooms that, because there are no large meeting rooms in Topsom. If you're an organization and you want to go somewhere and hold something, you don't have a lot of opportunity. You can go to the library under very set circumstances. So we were thinking that could be a revenue stream to this whole subject. Anyways, from those meetings, it became very apparent after I went home in March, after getting the update, after we received the update from the committee. The prior town manager never relayed to the committee nor staff any of the conditions that at the time the five individuals that were on the board had for this. So I was very surprised when I heard the update in March, because it didn't match anywhere that the board had talked about. And I will say I am a very, very strong proponent of this, but I know it is a fragile vote that got us even to this point. And it was strictly exploration. So I certainly didn't want to damage that vote, because it very well could have ended July of that year on a 2-3 vote, and we wouldn't even be in this point. But ultimately, I guess that was, as I look at it, it was my fault. It was the board's fault that we didn't assure that information was brought forward. And that's something I'm aware of more now when these things happen. We want to make sure everyone receives our thoughts. and expectations and what we have on for groups. So that's the background, if you will, where the formulation of this committee came from. Then we held interviews and we sent them on their way. So I guess unless I missed anything, if anyone recalls anything otherwise, chime in, I guess. But I want to know where this board sits in support. And I think there's only 4 of us here tonight as I'm scrolling. Yeah, so there's only 4 of us here tonight, but I just want to have an idea from the group. Do we still have that same vision of what the community center is? I want us on a page prior to sitting down with this committee. So in fairness to them, when they give their time, they know what would be supported, what would be expected, because they were caught by surprise also. They didn't receive any of this background information as we thought they did. So that's kind of where I'm at. I don't know where everyone else has given any thought to this, or where are people today? It's not a vote. You're not committed to anything, but I just want some feedback from the board.
Dave, I have quite a few, I won't say concerns, but comments, I guess. I don't feel that I've changed my mind much. At this point, I feel we're in different times with COVID. It doesn't mean that we have to stop living or stop life, but we don't know where that's going to take us. We are all relying on the vaccination. If that happens and we're good a year from now, and that proves I feel we should continue to go on and maybe talk about it. But right now, I don't know if that's the right thing to be talking about. I do feel I've heard from 4 business people in the last week that are saying they're just barely hanging on here in Topsom, and they don't know how much longer they can go. And I have a lot of feeling for that, because I know they're working twice as hard and they're trying to keep it going. If those businesses go out, it's a loss of revenue for us. So that's just the little things that play in my mind. And it can't always be about the doom and gloom of taxes or money either. I understand that. And if I saw a community center, I see it as a strong private partnership. And I also see it as we doing it. That's how it started out. We, as the town of Topsom. It doesn't have to be. I think we have a brand new high school that has a lot of space for recreation, and I know they're going to say they aren't going to let us in, or there's not. I also feel there are a few senior places, and there is the library. Having said that, I don't disagree that we shouldn't pursue it just for the future. So, but right now, with the way everything is and the way money is, I just have a tough time going forward with it.
Dave?
Thank you, Ruth. Yep, go ahead, Roland.
Yeah, so I remain 100% behind this. And I think if anything, this has made it even more apparent that we need it, because, quite frankly, you have people that are basically living isolated. And, I think when this whole pandemic ends, that, people are going to really want to socialize more. And I think this type of building offers that opportunity for pretty much every age group. So I don't see this being sort of an age-related issue at all. I think what's important is that folks that are interested in pursuing this have an opportunity to talk about, what are the potential uses, basically give them a blank slate, have them talk to the stakeholders out there, the public, and find out, what are your primary needs. And from there, you determine, what are your needs. And then, because you're not talking about any money at this point relative to just this little amount we gave. So I'm really interested to hearing what, those that support this have to say. And, what are the most common or recommended uses for this facility as well. And let's find out from there, where we go with it relative to what are the next steps in terms of, what's needed in terms of funding for any type of deeper evaluation. But I think first and foremost, I want to hear from the individuals that have really spoken up and said they support this. And if they do a little bit of grassroots research and outreach, we may find out that the group is quite a bit bigger. So, that's where I stand now.
Roland, just because I'm going to make a note here, I'm making notes for what everyone said, just so as we're in the meeting with the committee, I can at least give some starting points and then we can all go from there. Because it'll be on Zoom, so it'll be a little bit more challenging. When you say go out, so when they came to us in March, they were ready to put out an RFP for kind of that information you were looking for.
Mhm.
Do you support using the RFP to do that? Just it's the professional experience that can go out and do it, or are you supporting them as a committee to do some of that groundwork before we bring in professionals?
Oh, I think they can
Or
do a
does it
lot of
matter
this.
to you?
I think if they could do a lot themselves initially, just
Yeah.
heck, there are enough of these local Facebook pages, for example, where they can use that as outreach as an effective way to, gauge, what some of the potential interest is, have some discussions with the media, just, to build sort of the awareness that this is being thought of potentially. And from that, gauge the reactions and how strong is the interest. And what I really want to know is, what are they looking for in this type of building? Because that'll give you some idea scope wise in terms of how big is this going to be potentially if you try to solve for all those needs. Maybe, and again, to your point, maybe that you don't do that.
Okay. All right. Matt, you are the most anticipated opinion in this entire subject because I have no idea where you're at.
They're all
So
ears.
first question, the meeting room in public safety, the big one, is that not available for public use? Because when I was speaking with the chief, he said it was, and we've just never really advertised it as such. Because when I first walked in there and took a tour, I was pretty blown away by like that second floor of public safety, or excuse me, of public safety in particular.
That'll be Derek. You can handle that, but I just want to make sure when I say that room's available for meeting space, I'm saying a business come in and rent
Gotcha.
it to use it, just so you know. And I don't know what their standards are over there. But if Derek, you have any input on that or anything?
No, it's available for groups to use. Of course, at this time, there's no facilities here that are open to the public due to COVID, but it's a large room. It's not quite the size of the library. And we have to work around our own schedules with training for public safety and any other staffing requirements, but it is available to the public on a schedule, at the schedule of the room. And then there has to be allowed access up into that area. So those are the only restrictions. But
So what's the capacity?
I'd have to get back to you on that number.
You said it's a little bigger than the library. I've never been up there, so I don't know what it looks like.
It's big.
It is. Typically I'd say 30 to 40 people comfortably. If you had the tables kind of set up, facing a projection screen.
Okay, that helps. So it's not 100. It's in the 30, 40 range. Okay, that's helpful.
So I'm very much in Ruth's camp here. I know that sounds kind of weird.
I love you, Matt.
That was a big step.
I'm not, let me rephrase that. It's my biggest concern, and I've been trying to make this a continuing vein throughout my decisions when it comes to purchasing things. And I tried to make that evident, I think, when we were talking about a hybrid cruiser purchase, which is, in my eyes, I would immediately jump on that in a second. But because we have no idea what revenue sharing is going to be this coming session, I'm pretty sure we all know it's going to suck. Pardon my language, and that means that it's going to hit us pretty hard too. And we're going to have to make some tough choices next year. I'm just anticipating now. So the vein that I'm trying to continue through my choices here is we have about a year of a lot of uncertainty ahead of us. And Ruth, like you said, I hate living in fear here, and it's definitely not about tax dollars. Normally in a normal world, This is not something that bothers me. Spending money on a feasibility study, for instance, is totally something I would want to do. But I'm just concerned about setting that tone now and with expectations later on down the line that, oh, we've done a feasibility study, that means we must be doing something, you know, solid and concrete, and that just starts the snowball rolling towards.
Right.
So, I mean, I'm not opposed to a community center. I think a public-private partnership is the way to go. I think it would be a fantastic asset to the community, personally,
Bingo.
and I think having a swimming pool would be astounding. Because my daughter, I mean, swimming in the muddy river is fun, but it's not the best. It's pretty gross too sometimes. So
I've already had somebody stop by the house and say their wife would be willing to pay for it. A swimming pool.
Yeah, on installments though.
yeah. So I
Yeah.
mean, I love. So let me couch what I was saying in the fact that I'm not opposed to a community center. I think a feasibility study is worthwhile, and I actually thought it was something that we'd included in our budget last
We
year.
did.
Yeah. And that's
So-
okay. Yeah. That's why the RFP process stopped, because of that
Right.
conversation. Okay.
Yeah, they had,
Um,
and that was part of the 1920 budget, not, so it's carried over. It's not, we didn't budget for it 2021. It's been there now for a year and a half or
Okay.
whatever it may be.
So I think, Roland, what you said earlier about just gathering information that a feasibility study gathers, I think would be useful. And ultimately, I think when it comes down to a decision about where we go after the feasibility study, I mean, that would clearly be a bond issue, I think. Would it correct? Correct me if I'm wrong. Yeah. So I mean, we'd have a townwide vote of a sort on it anyway. Just the way I think about it.
Yeah, and I know it seems like we were, you know, through this process up until the point there's a positive go. You'd have at least probably a couple of public meetings just to, you know, really hear directly from the public as to what their thoughts are.
Yep.
Both, you know, pros and cons.
So
If you would ask me
I
this,
guess I
like,
would-
I'm sorry, Dave, go ahead.
No, that's fine. I was just going to say that's probably a point we need to make to this committee, is that we expect them to do some groundwork prior to going to that RFP. You know, hold some meetings, and how they do that right now, gosh knows. But like Roland said, there's enough Facebook groups out there or whatever. But go ahead, Matt. Sorry, I'm just trying to think this through.
No worries. What was I gonna say?
Sorry.
I lost my train of thought. When I hear the word Facebook, I get all.
Yeah.
Let me think. So I guess, Dave, for the workshop or with the committee, what you really want to do is basically just give them some marching orders, more or less, for the next 6 months to a year.
Yeah. So we've never done that, and if we're going to have this clearing the air meeting, is kind of what it is, because March was a bad meeting, right? I think it surprised both sides with the reaction from each other.
Yeah.
So I wanted to know where the five of us were, right? So I still feel we're kind of in the exact same spot, although with different people. 2 strongly in favor, 3 willing to, albeit somewhat begrudgingly, explore it. So I just want to make sure we have a message that they can work with. That's what I'm looking for. And I wanted to know, and to me, it didn't matter if it went from 2 to 3 to 3 to 2. It's still not a strong majority. So, but I wanted this back on the front plate, and I want them to have some rails that they can bounce off left and right.
Right.
Well, where we were so surprised last time with including all these other facilities and bringing other groups in and even other towns and stuff, that's what shocked us. And I still think some on that committee are very strong in favor of that. I've talked to them. But I do not disagree with a community center if it's planned well, but it doesn't have to be a Taj Mahal. It doesn't have to be hallways. It doesn't have to be what we've done in the past. And those are the things I'm concerned about for the taxpayers. I could get behind a community center if a lot of donation monies come in, and I'm talking a lot, and the businesses are behind it and individuals are behind it. But I'm not for a lot of, I think it should be a meeting place. I think there should be some recreation stuff, but I think that should be not all, because I do think we have a gorgeous school that we're going to be paying extremely high taxes on. We don't even know what that's going to be this coming budget season. And those facilities are somewhat open to us. And they might not be exactly what we want, but they are there. And so that's where I really feel that I don't want to see a $5 to $6 to $10 million building sitting here in the town of Topsom with maintenance, with personnel to run it. And we're talking a lot here.
Well, I mean, the people decide that. I mean, based on.
The people do decide it.
And they decide, what the functionality of that building will be. So that, the cost is not anything that's even part of the discussion until we figure out what exactly the utilization will be.
Right.
And, essentially, how, let's just say, how complex the structure has to be based on, how many different types of use will there be that maybe aren't complementary to one room, for example. As opposed, you may have like a great room, which is a multi-purpose center, but you may have these breakout rooms as well. And again, I have no idea because, quite frankly, I've not managed too many of these buildings. Like, it would be very interesting to do a tour if you could on a few, just to see how they've worked out. I mean, there are others in this area, but yeah, I
Where are they, Roland? Where are they?
Wiscasset has one.
Yeah.
Isn't there one?
Okay.
Is there one in Falmouth?
So I will go to
They've
West.
got them They've got them listed in their report and stuff that
Okay.
Derek forwarded
Yeah,
us.
all right.
Because
Yeah.
they talked about a couple towns.
I think I'll go visit them and some of them and see.
I mean, part of it is,
Maybe
you
the-
may have a year one plan that talks about how it's used by the town. And then from there, based on how it's being used, you may, at that point, to Dave's point earlier, where are the revenue opportunities? Do you have capacity to rent it out for various family functions or business functions, things like that? So I think we just have to figure out over time, where the opportunities are, but, assume that it will change, or as things, as they progress over time.
Some community centers that I've seen are totally private and you rent out space as you go. It's not taxpayers funded.
Oh, yeah, well, yeah, that's more of a social club kind of thing, so, or it could belong to a
But
church.
they rent it
or
out
something
for
like that.
many things. Yeah.
So I'm going to give
So
you
what
a
I was
little
going
bit
to
of,
say, Dave,
go ahead. Go.
if you had asked me 4 months ago or so of the same question, I probably would have been far more against even moving the conversation forward. And personally, I'm still not super invested in it myself, but I've heard a lot of people who are. And I'm sure that in 5 years, when my daughter wants to do something and burn some energy off, I'm probably going to be like, okay, hey, it's February. I wish I had a community center I could go throw my daughter in the pool at or something. So I'm certainly leaving that door open. And just because it's not impacting me now doesn't mean it's not going to impact me or be beneficial to me later on down the road. What about just throwing a pool next to the Grange and calling it good? Closing it in? Centrally located?
You talking to Gibraltar or?
You know what, Matt? It's funny you say that of you'll want it in a couple of years because I've been thinking a lot. I mean, I've made it very public that I am in favor of this and I want to see this. But I also think, I've got 14 and 12-year-old boys who, and I'll get to where my thoughts are. In my opinion, this thing doesn't start 2023, 2024. Knowing some of just what you said, Matt, we don't know where we're going to come out of. We know it's going to be bad, what the session's going to bring for revenue sharing. We know we have a $750,000 roughly culvert that needs to be replaced in Elm Street. We've got a couple other things in the next few years that are already identified and needed. I've viewed this thing as a several-year process of planning before we're even ready to go talk about a bond. So I'm not going to support being bond ready next May, this May. That's not in my head. To me, this is a slow process. But it's funny what you said is in a couple of years you'll want it, and I keep wondering to myself is, well, will it be that important to me in a couple of years? Because
Could
the
be,
boys
yeah.
are 12 and 14, and where will they be? Will they need that? But the more, because in my head, this is all about recreation activities. I've been a part of the town's programs, and I'll be honest, I believe we're lacking in what we have to offer. I know how hard it's been to get gyms to hold basketball programs. I know that you say we have a beautiful school, but they also have multiple teams that need to practice. And I don't see, just because it's beautiful and it was expensive for the state, doesn't mean we're going to gain any more access than we ever had before. So I've always viewed this as community center, where I was going as far as recreation opportunities. But the more people that have, since this committee's been formed and hearing other thoughts and opinions, 4 or 5 years from now, maybe I need it for socialization. Maybe I need to be one of those groups. I doubt it. I don't want to be around people, quite frankly, but there's so many people who are looking at it in a different age bracket. I'll be
Right.
50 before this thing gets moving, and what will be my interest? I don't know.
You can have your bridge club there.
So that's right. Well, I've got to learn how to play.
Nesta.
So I'm with you. I think you will come and find that it would be quite a necessity eventually. But I question myself: am I aging out of the necessity because of my kids? But the more I hear people talk of that need for a gathering space, it makes me see a different light.
Partially what convinced me over the past 4 months as well. It wasn't just children, but
Yeah.
other folks I've spoken to.
Right. But yeah, again, I'm not totally opposed to it. I just have a lot of concerns. And since you put it, it could be 5 years down the road. But I think whenever the committee is to do a lot of work, but whenever we commit to a feasibility study, we're really almost committing to the project.
And
you know
what,
mentally.
Ruth? And yeah, I have a note here I made for myself, because I would, just as Roland said, I would like to see this committee do a lot of groundwork before we even go spend money, RFP, find out. I believe everyone in my social circle wants this, but how big's my social circle? So we need to find out from the community that they want it. But I made a note to myself that if this thing starts to get out of hand, as far as cost, inclusion of other towns and schools, I have zero interest. I have zero reservation of rejecting it in the future, because I know this thing started with such a fragile support. Again, I still think today it's 2 to 3 against, but 3 people who are willing to explore, and I'm not going to make them uncomfortable pushing something. So I have no problem saying no if after an RFP, to say, hey, we explored it. It just doesn't, we don't believe it works for us, and we don't move it forward.
Right. And to that point, you brought up a good point in terms of where it's going. This is the kind of thing where I would expect regular updates to the board, just so we know that the rails are not widening or they're going off in a different direction. And, we get surprised, where a lot of expectations have been built.
Yeah, I read through their notes from their meetings that we got, and
Me too.
they're reaching out to schools and other towns, and what does the library need? And this was all about a cost-controlled community center to meet some goals, right? The essentially what was that driving force, was looking at what St. John's just built. All granted, that was built on a lot of personal donation money from the Olette family to make it look like it did. But there's people in
Yeah,
town
20
that believe
bucks in
they
there.
can.
Come on now.
But there's, Jim Howard, if you recall, Rich made a comment. Jim Howard said he believes that they could have built that for half the cost. So this stuff's in my head that I think we can accomplish something, but at a cost that we can all swallow.
Yeah, and you
So-
speak
Yeah.
to businesses. I mean, actually, I think this would be very attractive to businesses because I think it's bringing people or keeping people in the town and not going elsewhere for recreation. And you can see the restaurants catering events. I mean, there's all kinds of things that could go on there. It could be pro-business.
You talk about your constituents or people that in your circle, people in my circle are very concerned. The few I've talked to, I haven't talked to thousands of people, but they do have concerns. So I think I don't think we might get 50% support, but from what I've talked with people about, I don't think we'll have more than that. But it depends on how we sell it. And it depends on how big this gets. I mean, government tends to run away, with some ideas and things like that. We all know that. And we're not being honest if we don't say it. But that's my caution. And again, it's not dead with me by any means, but I want to see a lot of stuff before I commit to it, or before I commit to even going forward with the RFP, because the concern is what's here right now, what the state budget, like Matt said, and that I was in Matt's camp for. And then we have the school. We have no idea. We know it's going to be large. And every time you pick up the paper, they need more and more and more. They need more teachers. They need more this. They need more that. And probably they do. But with them trying to deal with this COVID, but so do businesses. They need more and more and more. So I just don't know where. And Roland said finance shouldn't be, but it's got to be in back of your mind. It's got to be in back of, unless we're absolutely sure what it would do to our taxes at some point, if it's livable. And I thought this board at one time, the previous board said we did not want to bond anything. I thought that was one of our conversations.
Absolutely. And I'm a person, Ruth, that said I don't want to bond anything, but I do know that there are some things at some point that you just can't say, I'll never, ever bond again, because there would be
Right.
something.
Yeah.
We
anything
went down a path that we were bonding pickup trucks involved. I mean,
Right.
But
so-
if you're buying an asset that's going to last 50 years, I mean, it's absolutely imperative that you bond it, because it's crazy to have one generation pay for something that's covering multi-generation use.
Right.
Climate change. Roland. Sorry, whoops.
Dave's having a good time. Matt's having a good time.
What was I going to say? So I just went through this process with National Science Foundation called ICOR, and it's basically like this market discovery process where I went out and asked a bunch of aquaculturists what the biggest issues for them were, to try and figure out if my tank project would be a fit for their problems. They basically told me about anything that they had an issue with, whether it was regulatory, environmental, market chain, supply for feed, that sort of thing. And it was really helpful because it was sort of an objective, like, focus group, even though they didn't know they were giving me like answers to questions that I had in my head already, but it was really helpful. So I guess where I'm going with this is, if we want to have the committee do some legwork in between now and 6-8 months, a year, whatever, maybe doing something similar where they spend some of that feasibility study money to develop a short survey. I know we hate surveys, and they are expensive, but it might not be a bad thing just in the interim for them to sort of flesh out a survey to send around to citizens to maybe talk about or query them, like, what are what are your some recreational needs, or what do you envision as a solution to this particular set of issues, or something like that, and see where we come up or wind up in the end. And honestly, we'll probably wind up with a community center, but at the very least, we'll have a good idea about what the community wants. And I mean, data from that could be pretty valuable too for Rod and for Pam and Andrew.
Sure. I agree with you, Matt, on that. But as long as it's not a skewed survey.
Yep. Oh yeah. There'd have to be a lot of work. I got run over the tracks a couple times by my coordinator for the program I mentioned, because a lot of my questions were very like, "Hey, do you want a tank?" And I couldn't ask that. So I had to ask, like, what is impacting your bottom line right now? I mean, that was about as specific as I could get. So like, there are some pretty interesting answers that were told to me. So I think we could get some pretty decent answers from a similar survey. But again, that would be putting work on either Pam, Rod, Andrew, and partially Derek to write something and then oversee the committee as they're coming up with something, and that's staff time. And I don't want to put any more additional staff time or work on you guys right now.
At the moment, yeah.
Pretty ding dang full.
Got to save some money so we can hire staffing for the rec center. Community center. I'm sorry. I got to say the word community center now.
Got you, Dave.
Derek, what do you think logistically, or Pam or Rod, what do you guys think logistically about a survey? I mean, is that something you guys have ever, I don't recall ever getting a survey from the town myself.
The town's done quite a few in the past, Matt.
All right, just like paper?
They've been like little survey monkey sort of things though. But I think what you're saying is what this would need.
Yeah, correct.
Mailed to people,
Yep.
Not free. Some skin in the game. If you're going to answer this, your opinion is, I guess I view when you can just jump on a survey monkey and put something, how much skin are you throwing in the game?
Right. Yep.
In the past, there has been paper surveys gone out from the town in the past, quite a few. We used to have surveys on our counter, on the tax counter and the clerk's counter, and asking people what they feel their most important need is, and things like that. I mean, that's just a small survey, but you did get some responses to it.
Yeah, I just think, I mean, even if we did it like a survey monkey or an email blast or something, you're still going to be missing out on a decent size of our population.
You are.
And like you said, Roland, this is not just a intergenerational thing, but this is definitely a whole town-wide decision that I think is, if we do end up going in Sarut, like I said before, it'll be a bond vote. So we should at least involve the whole community in the beginning, in the process, and hand the baton, I guess, off after the survey to the committee to do their work, and then after a year, come back and see where we are.
So,
with a number of different updates in between. Sorry, I didn't mean to say like, hey, go off and do your work.
So, guys, Matt asked a question. What have you done with surveys? What have we done? What's the thoughts? Does anyone have anything to interject there? Is it time consuming? Where are you?
Yeah, Dave, this is Derek. We'd have to look into it. And I'll talk to Pam and Rod and the rest of the staff on probably the best approach with a survey. And we can get back to you on that.
Okay. And that's just a thought too, by all means. I mean, that's just my thought. So if you guys think it's stupid, tell me. I won't be pissed.
No, that wasn't stupid, Matt. We'll wait for the other stuff.
Yeah, what I'll do is we'll talk about it here, and soon we'll send an email out to the group.
So
how we can best approach a survey.
So does everyone feel we've kind of given a picture here when we sit down with this committee? We're prepared to. So I guess what I hear, this isn't we're not ready in the next year or two. These are our concerns, costs, revenue sharing, upcoming commitments the town already has. Want the committee to do legwork, often updating the board prior to even going for an RFP for helping to help do this. Reach out to the community, whether it be that survey, whether there's a series of Zoom meetings, I don't know what it takes. We need to know the level of support. Did I miss anything? I'm looking through. I'm going to, when I give this, I'm going to give them the same background of where we were a year and a half ago, because they never got that. Then I'll give a top view of where the group is today, that we're kind of in the same boat. We're 2 strong, 4, 3 that are willing to look, but have great reservations. And then everyone chime in from there would be my thought. If any particular person wanted to make that's your statement, you make your cause, but I want them to know that this is a timid moving forward. I appreciate it that we're moving forward at least. So
Do we have any, are we going to give them an outline or just let them go for it like they have and all inclusive?
well, that's something, let's discuss that. I'm not in support of reaching out to the schools. I'm not in support of reaching out to area communities. I know the library's got their own projects, but man, I'll be right up front. I think if the library gets involved, this thing snowballs fast and it gets a little bit out of hand. It gets big.
Yeah, they have a different mandate.
I think it needs to be separate. I just don't see it. Once it's established, I see the town and the library being able to do multiple things together there. We'd still be not one unit, because they're not a part of the town. But there would be that partnership, and I think it'd be a stronger partnership than, maybe they've got an ability to help, but I just worry if it snowballs into any other groups, this thing gets out of hand, and we might as well kill it now.
Yeah, I'm
That's my
mostly
take.
interested, at this point, I'm mostly interested in having them do the legwork to determine what the needs are. What are people actually interested in this kind of building? And, what type of services do they envision being offered? Because until that's determined, anything else beyond that is really premature relative to any type of sizing, scoping, pricing, any of that. If they say we've got demand for this many birthday parties or this many senior meetings or whatever, plus we want a multifunction room, and then you start saying, okay, somebody could scope this out and give us a number. And because then that'll probably drive whether people accept it or not, or support it.
Does that answer your question, Ruth? Matt's just
Almost,
deep in thought,
yeah.
so he's not going to say anything. Okay.
Oh, well, it's almost, what Roland said, but you're not going to give them any guidelines, what we would like to see, not to go beyond that, or it's pretty hard to tell. I don't even know if we should tell a committee the limitations. We can say, this is what our expectations are.
Well, and I think that's where we go. And I think that's probably where I was thinking, Ruth, that they understand that this is not a fully supported action by a group of 5 that have ultimate say whether it moves on anywhere. So you need to keep that in mind, or the project will die. And be blunt about it. This is how this group of 5 sits today. And even after November, the most you're going to get is, one different person, because it's only rolling this year. So it's either the same group of 5,
Only rolling.
if he decides,
Yeah.
well, if he decides to run, or however it works out, there's only one change here, and that's one person of support, quite frankly. So no matter what happens, this isn't going to go 3-2. It's going to stay 2-3 for the next 2 years. So I think you give them where we are, and they understand that if you don't match what we're thinking, your work may be for nothing. Those are the guidelines I would give, as far as, that's me.
Yeah.
And the last thing I have to say is, if I see things different with the pandemic, and I know we can't live in fear, and we can't stay still because of the things that's going on. But until we see that budget from the town, from the state, and the school budget and some other things, I even feel that the assessment deduction on people's taxes that we get from the state might not have the increase that they had passed before, because I mean, things are really tight. Pretty soon we'll hear about that on the state level. So if things, I mean, again, I don't want to see something so massive that it's unmanageable and costs the taxpayers a lot of money, but I'm behind some kind of facility, maybe in the future. And I just want to say that door is open, but it's not until we hear more and we see more what the year's going to bring.
I'll be honest, Ruth, I'm polar opposite of that. I am not concerned of this year's tax rate. I am not concerned with this year's income because I don't view this year. I don't view it next year.
Right.
I don't view this even going to town meeting until the day I walk out, November 2023. I want a plan ready to go to town meeting in May. I'll be right up front. That's my number one goal. So this thing wouldn't even go to a town meeting in my head till May 2024. So I am not worried about the things that we don't know what we don't know at this point. 4 years
No,
from
we
now.
don't. Yeah.
So I'm not going to let right now concern me financially.
Have you scoped this out, Dave? It sounds like you've written.
What's that?
Have you scoped this whole chain down? Have you like written this out in like a Gantt chart?
This has been in my head
Yeah,
for
sure.
months now. I've got it in my head. I hate writing things down, Matt. If I die, man, there's so much knowledge gone. I don't write anything down. No one's going to have it.
I'm glad we're on Zoom and recording it.
Yeah, sorry.
Yeah, true.
So that's my take, Ruth. I'm not scared of right now. Be honest, I'm more scared that we've got kids and I think it was Roland that said it, kids and adults that are shut in right now and there's no place to go. And I still think we could still accomplish some sort of, even in the middle of this pandemic, there are ways to do things as a group safely.
Like having
So-
board meetings.
Well, I mean,
We haven't figured that out yet.
no, there's ways. Well, if we had a larger community center with a larger room, we could do it. But right now we're
What
stuck with
about
the room we have.
upstairs, the fire department? That's
No
no big,
camera. Yeah, we
we have
could.
downstairs, right?
I will search that out. Derek,
Thank
be
you.
prepared to take me over there.
Okay, Dave. I've had enough fun.
So that's where I'm not worried right now. Doesn't mean I won't be, but that culvert comes in at 1.5 million. We're another year out.
And the other thing is, I think
Anything-
at some point they should socialize this with the Chamber of Commerce too.
There's so many directions this thing can go.
Thinking
I
about who
did-
has to open checkbooks.
I did hear what you said, Roland, and took it under the bond. The only thing we don't want to get in bond, not trouble, but like we extended a lot of bonds the last few years, but a bond like the building and 50 years, people for 50 years would be using it. Makes a lot of sense.
Yeah, that's the smart way to do it. You're right. Anything like a 5-year, anything like a 5-year life, that's just crazy. That's an operating expense of money.
Anything else, folks?
Good discussion.
Derek, your group good?
I'm good.
Pam, Rod, or Andrew, do you have anything to add?
All good here.
Cool. That's what I like to hear.
So I might add, Rod was one of the aquaculturists I interviewed for my project. He was very helpful. Though he sort of knew what I was doing.
Excellent.
I just appreciate hearing your perspective because that clearly wasn't communicated when we began the process.
that became obvious by the time I got home in March. I figured that out.
Cool. This was a good discussion, though.
Yeah. Appreciate it, guys. Next Thursday night. Last
Great.
one
Yep.
before the holiday.